I remember the day the McCormicks pulled up, a storm brewing on the horizon I couldn't yet see. Ours was a quiet stretch, just outside Chicago, where green lawns stretched and kids mostly kept to their own postage stamps of Earth, or the park down the street. That was before the three boys, all under 12 but built like miniature linebackers, descended like a plague. They were a maelstrom of raw, uncontained energy, and my tulips were their first unwitting victims. It started small, insidious. A shadow flitting across my peripheral vision, a blur of motion cutting through my front yard. At first, I shrugged it off. Kids being kids, right? Then came the crunch, the sickening sound of a small foot deliberately mashing my carefully cultivated tulip bed. My first reaction, almost comically naive now, was to be reasonable. I walked down to their house, a polite smile glued to my face, and knocked. Brenda, the mother, answered, her face a mask of bored indifference, as if I'd just interrupted a pivotal moment in her daytime drama. I kept my voice calm, almost unnervingly so. "Hey, I live a few houses down. Could you ask your boys not to cut through my yard? They trampled my flowers." Brenda actually truly laughed, a dismissive, airy sound that scraped across my nerves. "Oh, that? Come on, they're just kids. They don't mean any harm." My flowers were dead, a pulpy mess, but her hand waved it away like a pesky fly. "It's just some flowers. They'll grow back." It was then I knew this wasn't going to be easy. I turned and walked away, a seed of something cold and hard beginning to sprout in my gut. I was so horribly wrong. It didn't stop. It intensified. They were a daily invasion, a chaotic surge across my lawn, leaping over my small wooden fence like it was some absurd hurdle course. Every time I tried to intercept them, they'd scatter, their laughter echoing, mocking me. Then came the rock. I watched, frozen, as the youngest one picked it up, a small, dark projectile, and flung it at my beloved garden gnome. The ceramic exploded in a silent, agonizing burst of white. That was the flashpoint. I stormed back to their house, my knuckles rapping against the door with a desperate urgency. This time, Steve, the father, answered, a smirk playing on his lips. "Your kids are destroying my yard," I spat, my voice raw with fury. He just shrugged. "You again? Thought we talked about this. They're just having fun. Boys will be boys." My jaw ached, a silent scream building behind my teeth. "They broke my gnome! They're ruining my plants!" He just shrugged again, a dismissive gesture that set my blood boiling. "Then don't put breakable stuff outside." It was a wall, a solid, unyielding wall of indifference. The HOA was useless, a toothless tiger. A different approach then, a darker, more desperate one. I drove to the hardware store, my mind a churning vortex of resentment and burgeoning defiance. I bought a taller fence, a formidable barrier compared to my flimsy decorative one. An entire weekend vanished, swallowed by post holes and hammering, a futile attempt to reclaim my peace. The next morning, it was gone. My yard, a landscape of raw, intentional destruction. Flower beds ripped open, garden lights smashed, my brand new fence kicked down, splintered wood scattered like bone shards. Muddy footprints, thick and mocking, covered everything. They hadn't just run through it, they had wrecked it. I saw red, a blinding, furious haze. This wasn't childish mischief, this was an act of war. I pounded on their door again, the sound echoing the thumping in my chest. Brenda answered, her eyebrow arching in a challenge. "Your kids destroyed my yard!" I shouted, the words tearing from my throat. "Prove it!" she drawled, her voice dripping with contempt. "I can literally show you the footprints." I gestured wildly, my hand trembling. She gave me that smug, infuriating smile. "Kids run around. You can't prove it was my kids." I stood there stunned, wanting to scream, to break something myself. But a cold, calculating resolve settled over me. I took a deep breath, stepped back, and turned away. Not another second wasted on reason. I would make sure they never set foot in my yard again. Joe, my friend, the farmer, answered my call with a guffaw when I spilled the story. "Oh man, I got just the thing for you. I couldn't string an electric fence. That was out. Illegal. And honestly, I didn't want to actually hurt them. Joe's solution was better. He lent me a low-voltage animal training mat, the kind that delivered a harmless but intensely unpleasant static shock designed for keeping dogs from digging. That was just the appetizer. Next, I installed motion-activated sprinklers, usually meant for deer, but with a water pressure that would make a fire hose blush. Anything moved within range, and a blast of icy water would erupt. The final flourish, the coup de grace, a motion-activated speaker. I downloaded the most demonic, unholy growl I could find online, something straight out of a horror movie. I tested it late that night, and even I felt a chill slither down my spine. Then I waited. Sure enough, the familiar sounds drifted through the night. Sneakers slapping pavement, Hushed giggles. They were coming. I flicked off my porch light, peeking through the blinds. The first boy, a shadow in the dim light, sprinted into the yard and stepped square onto the mat. Zap! A shriek tore through the silence, and he recoiled so fast he tripped over his own feet. The second boy, fueled by misplaced bravado, pushed forward, and the sprinklers detonated, drenching them in freezing water. Then, the growl, deep, guttural, a sound ripped from the bowels of hell itself. All three boys screamed, a visceral, terrified sound, like they were being dragged to their doom. They turned and fled, slipping in the mud, clothes soaked, their hair standing on end from the shock. I bit back a hysterical laugh, but the real show began when their parents came barreling out of their house, Brenda and Steve yelling, charging into my yard without a second thought. Zap! Brenda shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated surprise. Steve, bless his oblivious heart, actually fell backward into the mud. They scrambled to their feet, soaked and shaking, their faces a bizarre tableau of fury and utter confusion. I stepped onto my porch, calm, almost serene. "Oh, having some trouble." Steve was livid. "What the hell did you do?" I crossed my arms. "I just protected my property. Maybe now your kids will stop destroying it." Brenda's face was a mottled red. "I'm calling the police. This is illegal." I smiled, a cold, sweet smile. "Sure, call them. I have security footage of your kids trespassing and destroying my yard. Let's see who gets in trouble." Her mouth opened, then snapped shut. She knew. I wasn't finished. "Your kids owe me for the damage. Either they fix my garden or I take legal action." For the first time, Steve had no clever retort. His fists clenched, but his gaze dropped. The next morning, those little monsters were in my yard, replanting every single flower. Watching them, on their hands and knees, digging in the dirt, fixing what they'd broken, should have been the most satisfying moment of my life. But I knew better. People like the McCormicks don't learn in one night. This wasn't over. The boys grumbled under their breath, but every time their movements lagged, I'd clear my throat and they'd jump back to work. Brenda stood on her porch, arms crossed, glaring, as if I were the one who had done something wrong. Steve was conspicuously absent. That worried me. The moment the kids finished, they stomped off, not a word of apology. Brenda slammed the door behind them, the windows rattling. I knew, deep down, this was just the calm before the next storm. It started subtly. The next morning, trash in my yard. A crumpled fast food bag, an empty soda can, a half-eaten candy bar. I dismissed it, thinking it had blown in. Then it happened again, and again. Every morning, new garbage. Not random litter, but deliberately placed. An empty ketchup packet, torn open, smeared onto my garden gnome. A milkshake cup, upended, its sticky contents seeping into my mulch. One day, a neatly tied bag of dog poop sitting right in the middle of my walkway. My security cameras caught nothing. Whoever it was, they knew where to hide. It was the McCormicks. I marched over, knocking hard. Steve answered, a smug smirk plastered on his face. "Can I help you?" I held up a soda can. "You want to explain why this keeps ending up in my yard?" He shrugged, feigning innocence. "Looks like litter. Maybe the wind blew it over." My jaw tightened. "The wind doesn't squeeze ketchup onto garden gnomes." He grinned, that infuriating, condescending grin. "Guess you got a real mystery on your hands then." I wanted to punch him, to wipe that look off his face, but I wouldn't stoop to their level. I smiled instead, a thin, chilling smile. "All right, guess I'll just have to install more cameras." That wiped the smirk clean off his face. I wasn't bluffing. That night, 2 more cameras joined the surveillance. One nestled in a tree, peering down at my garden. The other, tucked under my porch roof, aimed directly at my walkway. Then I waited. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the camera feed and my blood ran cold. Steve, 40-something. Steve, a grown man, creeping through my yard like a phantom. I watched in real time as he pulled a plastic bag from his pocket and began to scatter something into my flower beds, shaking it out with practiced ease. When he was done, he scurried back across the street, a pathetic caricature of a cartoon villain. I grabbed a flashlight and bolted outside. My flower bed was covered in salt. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't just trash. He was trying to kill my garden. I stood there, trembling with a cold, righteous fury. I knew what salt did to soil. It poisoned it, killed it, rendered it barren for months, maybe longer, and he'd done it in the dead of night like a coward. I took pictures. Then I called the police. 10 minutes later, the cruisers arrived. I showed them the footage. They took one look and walked straight to the McCormicks' door. I followed, a silent, grim specter. Steve answered, looking disheveled and annoyed. "Sir, we need to talk," one officer stated. Brenda materialized behind him. "What's going on?" The officer turned to me. "You want to explain?" I stepped forward. I have security footage of your husband sneaking into my yard and pouring salt in my garden. That's criminal damage to property." Brenda's eyes widened. Steve flushed. "That's ridiculous," he snapped. The cop held up my phone, the paused footage clear as day. Steve's mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing. The officer sighed. "Sir, you're under arrest for trespassing and property damage." Brenda exploded. "Are you serious?" I had never been more serious in my life. They cuffed Steve right there on his porch, Brenda shrieking. The kids stood in the doorway, eyes wide, one of them beginning to cry as their father was led to the car. He turned to me, hissing, "You'll regret this." I smiled, a chilling echo of his own earlier words. "Guess you got a real mystery on your hands then." They drove him away. But I knew this wasn't over. Brenda wouldn't let this go. And I was right. I thought Steve's arrest would be the end, a harsh lesson learned. I thought Brenda, perhaps, would finally see the writing on the wall, keep her head down. But I underestimated her pettiness, her sheer, unadulterated spite. Steve was out on bail within 24 hours. I saw him on his porch the next evening, arms crossed, glaring at me as if I were the criminal who had poisoned my own garden. Brenda paced, a furious silhouette, her phone pressed to her ear. The kids were nowhere in sight, a silent, ominous absence. The whole house radiated a toxic energy. I barely slept that night, waiting for something. I locked my doors, checked my cameras twice, ensured my motion sensors were active. At 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected. I opened the camera feed, and my stomach dropped. Flames. My trash can, ablaze. I bolted outside, fire extinguisher in hand. The flames were small, contained mostly to the edge of my driveway, but the message was clear. This wasn't just harassment anymore, this was arson. I put the fire out quickly, my hands trembling as I scanned the dark street. The McCormick house was a black void, no sign of life. But I knew. It was them. I checked my cameras, praying for a clear shot, and there it was. A hooded figure, too tall for the kids, too lean for Steve. Brenda. I clenched my fists. She wanted war. She was going to get it. The next morning, I walked straight into the police station, my phone clutched in my hand. The officer at the desk recognized me instantly. "You again?" He sighed. I nodded. "Yeah, and this time, it's arson." I showed them the footage. They watched, their faces grim. One of them frowned. "Looks like a woman." I smiled. "You got one guess who?" The officer sighed again, but this time, he picked up the phone. "We'll pay them another visit." Less than an hour later, a police cruiser rolled up to the McCormick's house. I stood on my porch, watching. Brenda answered. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the exact moment she realized she was caught. Her mouth opened, then shut. Her hands flew to her hips. Then she started yelling. Steve emerged, already fuming. But after a few minutes, the officers turned and left. No handcuffs, no arrest. I walked to my mailbox, affecting a casual air. Brenda saw me and smirked. "They can't prove anything," she called out, her voice a triumphant sneer. I smiled back. "Guess we'll see about that." That afternoon, a strange knock on my door. A teenage girl, maybe 15 or 16, stood there, shifting from foot to foot. "Olivia, 2 doors down." I think you should see something." My brow furrowed. "What is it?" She held up her phone. A video. Brenda sneaking out in the dead of night, setting the fire, then scuttling back into her house. I stared at the screen, barely breathing. Why are you showing me this?" I asked, my voice thin. Olivia shrugged, a defiant glint in her eyes. "She's been awful to me too. Her kids threw eggs at my dog last week. My mom wouldn't let me do anything about it, but I thought, you might." I looked up at her, a silent respect blooming in my chest. This kid had more guts than half the adults on the street. "Olivia," I said, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "You just became my favorite neighbor." I didn't hesitate. I forwarded the video to the police and drove straight to the station. This time, when the cops showed up at the McCormick's house, there was no arguing, no smug smiles, no denial. Brenda was arrested on the spot. Steve exploded yelling, swearing, turning on me, screaming that I had ruined their lives. The officers had to restrain him as they put Brenda in the car. As they drove her away, I stood on my porch and waved, but I knew Steve wasn't done. And I was right. Steve didn't take Brenda's arrest well. For days, he stomped around, a human storm cloud, slamming car doors, muttering under his breath every time he saw me. His kids weren't in school, holed up inside, I imagined, confused, scared, or maybe just stewing in their father's toxic rage. The entire street went quiet, a heavy, anticipatory silence. The neighbors knew. The repeated police visits weren't subtle. Olivia's video had spread like wildfire too. People whispered, some avoiding eye contact, others offering knowing nods of silent approval. The McCormicks had made their bed, and now they were lying in it. Then, on the third night after Brenda's arrest, it happened. It was late. I was watering what little remained of my garden when I heard it. A rustle, a shuffle at the edge of my property. I turned. Steve, standing at the curb, just staring. His eyes were wild, red-rimmed, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. He was unraveling. I didn't speak first. I just waited. "You think you've won?" He finally spat, his voice raw. I exhaled slowly, keeping my voice even. "Steve, go home! You took everything from me," he barked, stepping closer. "My wife's in jail. My kids won't talk to me. The whole damn neighborhood's treating us like we're the devil." "You did that to yourself," I told him, the words quiet, firm. He let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "You did this, you and that nosy little brat next door." I took a step forward, lowering my voice. "Your wife committed arson, Steve. That's not something you just get to laugh off. And you poisoned my yard. You let your kids destroy my property. You started this war, and you lost." His breath hitched, his hands twitching. He was going to swing, I could see it. And then, "Dad, stop!" One of his kids, the oldest, Jason, maybe 12, stood on their porch, barefoot, his face pale. Steve spun around, his face contorted in a mix of fury and heartbreak. "Go inside, Jason!" Jason shook his head. "I know what you did, Dad. Mom told me. She said you told her to do it. She said it was your idea." Steve froze. I stared at the boy, shocked. Even I hadn't seen that twist coming. Jason swallowed hard. "You kept saying it was his fault," he said, pointing at me. "But you made Mom do it. You told her the cops wouldn't believe him, that they'd just think it was some dumb kids. But you were wrong." Steve's face twisted. "Your mother was trying to protect us." Jason's voice cracked. "She lit a fire, Dad." "What if it had spread? What if someone got hurt?" Silence. Steve swayed slightly, as if his son's words had physically struck him. Then Jason turned to me, his lip trembling, but he squared his shoulders. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. I didn't know how bad it was until Mom got taken away. I just thought it was funny. But it wasn't." The kid looked me dead in the eye, and I could see it. He meant it. I nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, Jason." Steve inhaled sharply, his hands still clenched, but now he just looked small, like all the fight had been drained out of him. He looked at his son, then at me, and then finally at his own ruined house. He turned without another word and walked inside. Jason hesitated, gave me one last nod, and followed. Brenda stayed in jail for a few weeks before getting released on probation. She didn't come to say anything to me, and I didn't go looking for her. She and Steve must have had some kind of reckoning behind closed doors, because within a month, a for sale sign was planted in their front yard. They were gone by the end of summer. No dramatic farewell, no parting words. Just gone. I don't know what happened to them after that. Maybe they tried to start over somewhere else. Maybe they just brought their mess to another neighborhood, but something stuck with me. A few months after they left, I was outside trimming some hedges when I heard a voice. "Hey, mister!" I turned. It was Jason. I barely recognized him at first. He looked calmer, less like a kid who had spent his whole life running from trouble, and more like someone figuring things out. "You guys moved?" I asked, surprised. He nodded. "Yeah, new school, new house. It's better." I gave him a small smile. "Good." He hesitated, then looked at my garden. "It looks nice." I chuckled. "Thanks. No one's been stomping through it lately." Jason shifted on his feet. "I wanted to say..." He swallowed. "I wanted to say I really am sorry. I should have stopped when you first told us. It wasn't funny, and I get that now." I studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Takes a big person to admit that, Jason." He kicked a small rock. "I just didn't want you to think I was like them." I sighed. "You're not." His shoulders relaxed. Then he grinned. "Oh, and guess what?" "What?" "My mom made my dad take gardening classes, said if he was going to ruin someone's yard, he better know how much work it actually takes." I laughed, a real genuine laugh. Jason smiled. "See you around, mister." And then he jogged off. After they left, the neighborhood settled back into its rhythm. Olivia and I became unlikely friends. She'd swing by with her dog, we'd chat sometimes, share gossip about new neighbors. The kids in the area stopped cutting through my yard. People even started planting their own flowers. And me? I sat on my porch every evening, looked at my garden, and breathed easy. Because some battles aren't about winning. Sometimes it's just about proving you won't be stepped on.